Good morning again. Thank you all for staying. I appreciate it. Our next panel is about judicial involvement in pro bono, or judicial support of pro bono. I've been around for a while, and back when I was a baby pro bono coordinator lawyer, whatever that is, many years ago, we always talked about how you could use judges in your local rural areas to support pro bono, to get lawyers more tuned in with pro bono. But we always thought, what are those concrete things that lawyers can actually do to make life easier for a pro bono attorney? Are there things that they could do? Are there things that they could say at local bar association meetings? What are they allowed to do in terms of the rules? And there's a lot swirling around that. But the ABA recently is now promoting a new pro bono model rule for judges, or a new approach to that. So we're going to talk a little bit in this next session about how judges can promote or support pro bono. What are some of the rules? What are the ideas that they may have? What are their thoughts on access to justice and pro bono generally? And how that translates into better outcomes for all of you here in the room in terms of your experiences as pro bono lawyers and for clients who are seeking access to justice. Today we've got Chief Justice Thompson. And thank you very much for coming, Chief. Judge Marshall from Dougherty County Superior Court, who's here all the way from Albany, Georgia today. I think she gets the award for this particular CLE. Judge Marshall is also a former alum of Georgia Legal Services Program and the Albany office down there, and we're really pleased to have you here today. And then we have another Georgia Legal Services alum. There's something going on in the water down here in South Georgia, but this is Judge Marc who's a probate judge in Columbus, Georgia. We're glad to have you all three. Judge, Chief Justice, let me start with you. You have some remarks about pro bono role of the judges.
Thank you very much. I don't know how we're going to follow that first man, but and I see some really excellent people on the last panel as well. But good morning.
Good morning.
And thank all of you for being here. I want to direct most of my comments to why this work is so important. Most of you don't know, but I've been off the trial bench for more than 21 years now. So I'm going to defer to my colleagues on this panel who are trial judges regarding specifics of making pro bono activities and finding clerical and other resources to help them do their jobs. But having said that, I want to say on behalf of the Supreme Court of Georgia and the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism how very, very proud we are of all of you who volunteer your knowledge and skills to represent those with legal needs. Your stories are powerful and inspirational and embody the principles that to whom much is given, much is expected. You are living examples of this, and I hope that you're grateful for all that you have received in return. I know you are. Nevertheless, it's important that your ranks grow, and let me say why. I believe one of the challenges we face in the future is access to justice. Equal justice for all is a promise embodied in our Constitution and envisioned by our forefathers. Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell called equal justice, and I quote, perhaps the most inspiring ideal of our society. It is fundamental that justice should be the same in substance and availability without regard to economic status. Close quote. As Georgia continues to grow in population and diversity, access to justice is a challenge requiring the commitment and hard work of us all. Critical to the success of the judiciary is the public's trust and confidence, but the safeguard is future. We must guarantee access to justice for all people, as our laws were not made for just a few. Too many hard-working Georgians believe that justice is out of their reach, either because it's too expensive or because of where they live. According to the National Center for Access to Justice, when it comes to access to attorneys, Georgia ranks in the bottom 10 states. The lack of legal services is amplified in rural areas. According to a study by the University of Georgia, nearly 40% of the South's persistently poor counties are right here in Georgia. 70% of our state's lawyers work in the 5-county metropolitan Atlanta area. 62 counties have fewer than 10 lawyers, and 6 of Georgia's counties have no lawyers at all. Those of us who are judges are seeing a growing number of people coming to court with no lawyer and trying to represent themselves, particularly in divorce and other domestic relations cases. When people are unrepresented in court, often their interests are not championed. Judges don't have the information they need to make just decisions, and the courts are burdened in time and resources. This past year, under the leadership of outgoing President Patrice Perkins Hooker, the State Bar of Georgia, and under the sponsorship of House of Representatives Committee Chairman Alex Applewood of Glenn County, legislation was introduced to encourage private civil attorneys to work in severely underserved rural areas of Georgia. Under this legislation, a small number of law school graduates would receive annual assistance to help pay off their law school debts. And in exchange, the attorneys would agree to work 5 years in those Georgia counties that desperately need legal help. This pilot project would be just a small start, but it would be a good start. It did not pass this year, but I'm hopeful that it will this next session. In the meantime, I encourage judges, the State Bar, and all of you to do as much as you can to recruit more lawyers to join the ranks of those who donate their knowledge and skills to those who need legal representation. Thank you again for all that you do. We, at the appellate level, I think, are somewhat handicapped about what we can do other than encourage. But these trial judges can do a lot more meaningful things. I'm always reminded of the time that somebody told me early on in my career on appellate bench that if you can get 3 people to agree with you, you can say what the law of Georgia is. What they did not tell me, though, was how difficult it is to get 3 people to agree with you. But I know Judge Jolly's here and others that have experience as a trial judge and the power and the authority that you command is dramatic. You can make things happen for good or ill, but you can certainly make things happen. I'm as anxious as you to hear how these judges approach this. Judge Marc.
Thank you, Justice Thompson. And thank you all for this invitation today. I'm Denise Marshall from the Dougherty Judicial Circuit. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Dougherty Superior Court since 2009, so I've been in court for 6 years at this time. I did work for Georgia Legal Services for more than a decade, so there are a lot of friendly and familiar faces that I've known for quite some time present in this room. You know, it just never fails. In life, you always seem to, in the most innocuous ways, get more than what you give. And today has been consistent with that. The panel of presenters and the stories that they told were warming and chilling and just took me back, quite frankly. Justice Thompson wants to hear from us, the judges, but as a trial judge, let me say how grateful we are for the work that you do in this room. As a judge, we support pro bono work because it's so wonderful in so many ways. Not to mention some of the things that Chief Justice Thompson's talked about in terms of just cases and fairness, but the general access to justice. I bring you greetings from Southwest Georgia. Some of those counties that have no lawyers are in Southwest Georgia. Southwest Georgia is different. The economics, the legal access is all totally different. If you all are from the metro area and have really never been to Southwest Georgia, you just don't, it's something you gotta live. You know, I can't describe it to you. You gotta be there. We have fewer lawyers. We're more economically depressed with the infusion of all the advertising by plaintiffs' lawyers. Things are getting more depressing. But I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying what is. So the court, we are seeing an incredible number of pro se litigants, underdeveloped cases. I am an old legal services attorney. I mean, I still have that sensitivity. So I want to listen. I want to help. But the times that I have to say, you know, I can't be your lawyer and your judge. You know, we need help. A lot of what we are asking attorneys to do in our community is to help support self-help clinics and do free consultations or videos or whatever to help us help pro se litigants. I oftentimes shudder to think how incomplete some of the remedies that I may be signing off on are because the litigants just didn't know how to be inclusive and comprehensive in what they do. So pro bono attorneys are welcome and encouraged. From the bench, I think we have at least a threefold duty, and that is to acknowledge the work that you do. Pretty much like Ms. West is in the back, how the federal judge acknowledged her work, her effort, her passion, and her commitment. I think we all want to be acknowledged. Or it's good for others to see us acknowledged. So I think that's a part of what has to come from the bench. We acknowledge your commitment. Where you put your time and your treasure says a whole lot about you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that. We have also a duty to help you educate, to participate in educational productions where we help train lawyers. There's nothing wrong with that. We are a part of training efforts for new lawyers or for lawyers who are stepping out of their lane, so to speak, to help them do something a little different than what their expertise is. So I think the judiciary being a part of that training takes it to a different level for most people. And I think we have to step up and publicly promote pro bono work. I mean, this program to me was just like absolutely awesome. I just wish I could get a microcosm of this. Somebody, but this got to be a bar meeting for Dougherty County. Just not the whole panel, but at least 2 or 3 to tell your varied stories, because they were truly phenomenal. You know, and a lot of people may not take the time to come to the bar CLE to kind of get this. I will be speaking. Jolly, you help me on this, but I'll be speaking to the Council on Superior Court Judges. We need the pro bono push. I think we all do it in our own way, and we're very grateful for what we get, but I think the judiciary can do more. And I mean, we're all in this sort of together. Because like I said, particularly in family matters, in family cases, if we don't push our pro se divorces, they sit there. Some of us have more assistance in terms of law clerks and the like, but if it was not for young lawyers and legal services, I don't know what we do. We just clock the dockets because you find yourself being, you tread a thin line. You know, you want to move the case, you want to resolve these issues that we know. Like I said, old legal services lawyer. I mean, it's still in you. This is maybe not the most compelling case you've had this month, but it's a very important case. It's a life-altering case for those particular litigants. And you still and you want to help with that. But it's only, I mean, you do have to wear your judicial hat. And so I think promotion of pro bono work and acknowledging those who do the work, your colleagues watching. You know, if you get great accolades at the bar meeting or at other people hear it and they want to join those ranks. It is nothing like making a difference even from the bench. You know, we see it and we know it. Ms. Gale talked about her adoptions, and we were just back there talking. We, judges are human too. Like I said, old legal services lawyer, still feel good about adoptionism, and I know I can bat 100 on that. Generally speaking, I can please everybody in the courtroom, okay? I had a different experience this past week when I had a contested divorce. That was not a feel-good moment. But I generally can count on my adoptions for that warm and fuzzy feeling. And a lot of my custody cases too, if they're well done. And representation is needed so much in our cases. So I applaud you, I encourage you. Every night, like I said, I gotta have part of this program come to Dougherty County, okay? Because and some of you presenters, I need volunteers to tell those stories so that we can get Southwest Georgia up and running again. Legal Services has carried most of that burden for us. We do have volunteer attorneys who work for various agencies like the Council on Aging or the Lily Pad or our domestic violence shelters. We do have that participation. But we need so much more because of we're economically depressed for the most part, and it's hard to retain attorneys. But for pro bono, legal services, other public interest groups, you know, we would really be struggling. But with a dynamic profession such as this, I look forward to us turning the corner and great legislation being passed so that we have, you know, so that we have adequate representation in civil cases. I did legal services for more than a decade, and then I started judging. And I started out in city court, and magistrate court, and superior court. And I thought the worlds were two different worlds, but they're really not. My legal services clients followed me right on over to the criminal side, okay? So I still know all the same people, and they have the same issues. The subject matter is a little different, but representation is still critical to their existence. And we're in the business of making crooked places straight or a little less jagged. You are to be commended for what you do. Keep doing it and help us do more. Thank you very much.
These are really tough shoes to follow, everyone that's spoken today. I know in listening to the Eureka moments, I was thinking about a number of Eureka moments I had from going back to even before I was admitted to practice law. Also, I feel like in this crowd here, I'm just preaching to the converted. I think we really need to have the folks that are a little harder to persuade about pro bono activities and stuff, and maybe one of the missions of everyone in this room is to really get to the folks that aren't converted yet. As I said, I'm pleased and honored to be here. There's a couple of different points I've tried to make, and now they're all a little bit scattered, but I think I want to talk about pro bono generally and then tie it into the probate court in particular, because a lot of folks that practice law for a long time don't necessarily come to the probate court too often. One of the things I remember when I worked for Georgia Legal Services for 14 and a half years, one of the hardest things I found I had to do was say, well, I know your legal problem is very, very important to you, but we have 6 lawyers serving 21 counties around Columbus, and so we have to prioritize the type of cases we take. And I'm sorry, not to be flip about it, but I'm sorry you're not being beaten or there's not allegations of molestation, so we can't get involved in your divorce. That was really, really hard for me. And in fact, part of something when I left legal services, but still wasn't confined by some of the rules of the judicial canons, was to really push starting a family law information center in Columbus. There had been some old guard attorneys that really need to be cajoled more, that were very opposed to even having standard forms in family law cases. The theory behind that was they'd be taking money out of their pockets. And most of the folks that were filing pro se divorces or things like that legal services couldn't help folks with were not people that were going to be able to hire a lawyer. And one of the other things tied to the probate court, some people not having access to justice getting divorced meant they'd come to the probate court and lie on their marriage license application in order to get remarried. I can tell some funny stories about when we catch people at those kind of things. And husband shouldn't take the fifth when you're asked if you knew about your wife's prior marriage. Anyway, that's really beyond the scope of this. So we did get a family law information center started with the help of Lauren Meskin and myself, and basically we got standard forms up and running, and to sort of cajole some of the attorneys that were opposed to us actually even giving some advice about how to fill out the forms to folks in domestic cases, we picked the lowest hanging fruit. We said that on Friday mornings from 10 to 12, we'll have volunteer attorneys available to help you fill out forms related to legitimations. And of course, the Superior Court judge sent down a note saying, please help this person complete the child support worksheets. We would do that too. And I started recruiting attorneys to volunteer pro bono to help, and I was also there, and as I said, when I became the judge, it became a little bit trickier about me. It's hard to get the legal services out of it. We'll just put it that way. So that's one of the ways I was specifically able to try to get more access to justice in terms of assisting pro se's and still getting pro bono attorneys that didn't want to necessarily get into full representation, but we came up with something that clarified we were giving you legal information, and while you may have received a little bit of advice today, when you walk out the door, we're not representing you anymore, and some other things like that. The other thing that is really clear to me is that the legal needs of, especially in West Central and Southwest Georgia, far exceed the capacities of Georgia Legal Services, Atlanta Legal Aid, and all the other pro bono programs around. In fact, I'm now trying to keep statistics, but I think more than 50% of the filings in my court are pro se. And that can be good, that can be bad. Actually, something that Judge Marshall also said, I didn't realize how many of my clients from legal services also were involved in the probate court. A few of them with involuntary psychiatric commitments, who knew? But that was something that I didn't realize was going on. The probate court does have some advantages in that we do have standard forms that can help facilitate pro se folks. Justice Thompson said about getting people to agree. The one committee I would never sit on with the Probate Judges Council is their forms committee. It seems like I can't imagine how you can get folks to agree about those forms, and you do seem to change them fairly regularly. Some other things, I don't know how many of you really have practiced in probate court. Anyone? Okay. When I do these presentations for folks, I actually do something called the CIT, which is a crisis intervention for law enforcement. I sometimes call it how not to shoot the mentally ill. But when we talk about these things, I ask them if they've ever been to the probate court, and very few people raise their hands. And then I ask them if they got married in Georgia, and then they realize, yes, they did. And arguably the happiest things that go on in probate court are the gun permits and marriage licenses. And when I was working at Legal Services, I had occasionally went into probate court for a temporary guardianship, but I always associated it with dead people's property. And literally millions of dollars of estate property does pass through my signature each week, and getting that correct is very, very important. It's not really where my passion is. One thing that the probate court really does do is looks out for vulnerable people, whether that's compromised claims involving minors or incapacitated adults, temporary guardianships, which are more and more becoming like custody cases. In fact, I had a contested dissolution of a temporary guardianship where we ended it with a parenting plan for a grandma. But So we do those things. I see some of the richest people in the community and some of the poorest people in the community come through the probate court. The standard forms really do help for non-complicated matters, but there are some things where there is a standard form to do an adult guardianship and conservatorship. It's 49 pages long. In fact, actually, we do this little clinic, which is my little flyer here. I figured I had to bring some kind of materials with me. So there's the flyers there about our clinics. When we do the little PowerPoint presentation, we tell them about the 49 pages and say, do not hit print all in bringing them down. One of the things that actually, as I said, is looking out for vulnerable people in addition to minor children. Wednesdays at the probate court in Columbus is Psychiatric Commitment Day. We do a lot of, actually with the closing of Southwest Georgia Regional Hospital, we have, 9:30 is our crisis stabilization unit hospital commitment hearings. That's the Bradley Center. 10:30 is West Central Georgia Regional Hospital, which are either people coming off of forensic commitments or folks from Judge Marshall's neck of the woods, since they don't have a state hospital down there anymore. And then 1:30 in the afternoon is something that we're very progressive about, our community service board, our behavioral health board. We do outpatient psychiatric commitments with the idea that an outpatient commitment can prevent somebody from being put back inpatient. If I issue an order saying, thou shalt take your medicine, thou shalt go to the doctor, thou shalt abstain from drugs or alcohol, thou shalt go to psychosocial rehabilitation, and if you don't, I can find you in contempt, can sometimes motivate people to not end up re-hospitalized. And I do cajole attorneys to represent the mental health consumers in those cases on a pro bono or very low bono basis. So I actually do pay the attorneys that I do have to pay to represent folks in these more than the juvenile court, which I probably shouldn't be saying this on camera. But one of the things that's always another thing that's always bothered me is you could have attorneys from very expensive, fancy law firms out of Atlanta fighting in state court on the 11th floor of the government center over a car wreck, and maybe there's $50,000 to $100,000, not even a huge claim, but there's something. And those attorneys I know are making well over $250 an hour for the most part. And then you could have a parent whose parental rights are being terminated downstairs in the juvenile court, and that attorney that's representing that parent is making $30 an hour. There's something wrong with our system that we allow that to happen. So I pay him $75. But, so what have I done to try to encourage pro bono in the judiciary with as close to pushing that line about the judicial canons? One thing is we do have a guardian ad litem panel. Guardian ad litems I use guardian ad litems, especially sometimes when there's a pro se matter going on and I really need, and I feel it's not being adequately handled. A guardian ad litem can be a great way to move that along. My guardian ad litem panels, sometimes those cases are pro bono. In fact, actually, I strongly imply without requiring that if you want to be on our guardian ad litem panel, you need to commit to taking at least one pro bono case a year. And that seems to have worked out because some guardian ad litem cases can pay pretty well. Likewise with our county conservators, some can pay pretty well, others are essentially pro bono cases. The other thing that we've been working on lately, because this has been a bit of a heartbreak for us, is we have a number of parents that have been raising their developmentally disabled child all their lives. And the child turns 18, and now the doctors say, we can't talk to you about your child. Or I even had one case that the person called up here, she was living in public housing, and that person's child was turning 18 or 19, and it was time for recertification. And their housing authority was pushing back about, you don't have guardianship over this adult, and how do we know, and all that. I actually, and this might be something just to think about for screening, I sent that person to legal services to call their screening line. I said, tell them it's a housing case. But it got rejected as being, oh, we don't do guardianships. Now, my associate judge is a former managing attorney at Georgia Legal Services in Waycross. So it's real hard to get this out of our systems. And what we've now tried to do, especially geared towards low-income people with developmentally disabled children that are turning 18 or 19, and there's HIPAA, which you all have heard of, but there's also FERPA. I don't know if you're familiar with, I call FERPA the HIPAA of education. And both of those things can be very, very daunting for parents of people with developmental disabilities, or even on the autism spectrum, a variety of different things. So in order to try to meet this need, because I don't think really one can do guardianships and conservatorships very well pro se. Well, it depends on your level of sophistication, but there's a lot of lawyers around that really mess them up pretty badly. It's hard, you have to, if you read the rules and follow the directions and read the orders for service and get the times right, but I don't know, that's sometimes very hard for folks to do. And I consider guardianships and conservatorships one of the most important things and one of the most serious matters that you can ever do. The person that was passionate about the Constitution, well, I'm taking away your civil rights, including your right to marry, including pretty much the way I describe it, and when we do our little guardianship clinics, is I'm taking an adult and turning them back into a child and deciding who's going to be the parent for health and safety issues and who's going to be the parent related to the money. And that's a very, very, very serious matter. So what we've decided to do is quarterly, in cooperation with Georgia Legal Services and a nonprofit called the Disability Service Center, that's trying to become a one-stop shop for people with disabilities in our region. We are doing adult guardianship clinics on a quarterly basis. How it works so far is myself and Judge Crawley get up there and we do a PowerPoint dog and pony show about what a guardianship can do and what a guardianship can't do for folks, and how involved it is and how serious a matter it is. And then we've recruited a number of pro bono attorneys to be available to then sit down with folks that might, well, folks that meet Georgia Legal Services income criteria, and then they can capture that as a pro bono case, and those that don't meet the criteria, just to help them fill out the pro se forms. And then what we also do is have a pro bono attorney that sits on this panel agreed to be the attorney to represent the alleged incapacitated adult. And this seems to have worked so far so good in terms of I have probably 10 or 15 attorneys, and given that 70% of all the lawyers in Georgia practice in the 5-county metro area, to pull 10 or 15 attorneys to be pro bono attorneys in probate court has been, I think, is a success. I can also point out that some of those, the folks that go to the adult guardianship clinics aren't people that are income eligible. We've had a doctor of a severely mentally ill child come to the clinic, and so occasionally those pro bono attorneys get some paying clients out of the deal. In fact, that's sort of been the kind of how I've been selling it to folks. I think it's successful. Our next one is July 24th. And
So you're looking for some volunteers potentially?
well, or as I said, you're welcome to come down to Columbus. You're also welcome to, this is something I know that some of the judges around the state are also experimenting with different ways of accomplishing this.
So Judge, they could volunteer for you for a couple times to learn and bring it back to their own area, right?
I would love to see if we can export this further, and I'd be glad to talk with any of the probate judges in the state about how to make this work and as easy as possible for them. One of the things actually in thinking about also how I can help pro bono attorneys is I try to make it as easy as possible. If you told me you've been that you're representing this person because you got a referral from Georgia Legal Services and you're handing me an affidavit of indigence, I'm not going to question the affidavit of indigence. Can't tell you how many probate courts I would go to trying to do a temporary guardianship where I was told, if you can't feed the child, you can't, if you can't pay the court costs, you can't feed the child. And I've always sort of wanted to take that up, but you sort of pick your battles. I do try to make it easy in terms of those things. I treat all of the attorneys that are coming to us with respect, and I'm very appreciative of everything they do. As I said, I am interested in doing anything else I can to make it easier for pro bono attorneys. Also with the clinics, the way I sell that and the way it's been sold with our legitimation family law information centers, it makes it easier for the judges. Having standard forms, having attorneys that can help at least give people guidance about whether or not jurisdiction and venue are appropriate or things like that can really help the judges. Having folks talk about what the parenting plan is, things like that also can be very helpful. I don't know if I've really hit the points that y'all wanted me to hit.
Well, I actually have a question for all of you, if you don't mind. This may put you on the spot, and if it does, my name is Doug Amar. It's I've noticed, and you've actually touched on this, I've noticed out in rural Georgia where we have support-based health centers that we've got a legal aid program, plus their pro bono program, plus the court-based health services. We don't have a lot of involvement necessarily from the organized local bar associations there. I'm wondering why that is, and if you have any ideas of how we can fix that. How we can bring lawyers into supporting that and becoming part of that structure for low-income people.
I don't know why it is, but Southwest Georgia, Albany in particular, which I paint as being strange territory, we seem to be bridging that gap quite a bit. And I think it has to do with bar involvement. Our law librarian in Dougherty County is very active in the local bar and on access to justice committee. So it just depends upon the whole dynamics. We seem to be closing that gap. I won't have to close it a little bit further, but we seem to be closing that gap in terms of collaboration and us all kind of coming together and putting those pieces of the puzzle together. Because going back to all these standardized forms, our part of the state has a low literacy rate and educational level. So if you do all the forms you want to do, they still are challenged to complete them. So that's why the clinics and limited scope representation and all that is so important for us, for lawyers who don't want to take on the case full blast and lawyers who might not want to write a check. Consider just limited scope representation helping them to do, just to go over the forms, get the jurisdiction right, get you, make sure it's verified, answer the relevant questions. When you're talking about indigency affidavits, I mean, I have people who can't get that right. They want me to approve the fine. I don't mind, but you got to give me something to stand on. But I think we're closing that gap. The bar inclusion, back to your question, I think, is helping that.
A lot of the rural areas of Georgia, I think, are fairly disorganized as far as local bars are concerned. Now, one thing I see as a salvation that may not come in time for a lot of people, but I think is necessarily coming, is this leadership academy that the YLD is doing. They are recruiting people based on diversity of practice, based on diversity of geographic regions of the state, and I think that they're going to take a lot of the ideas that they are exposed to back to their local communities and make them actually flourish down there. I think that also if there is apparent exposure to the judges around the state for a lot of these things too, judges could be very instrumental in doing much more than they already do. I know that in some areas, judges don't want to mess with the bar. They just don't want to for their own reasons. And a lot of judges don't like a very active bar. Active bars are a problem. And so negative inertia that has to be overcome as far as judges are concerned. But I really do believe this YLD push on the Leadership Academy is going to be big in terms of dividends in years to come. The big bar, I think, is not as energetic as the YLD is, but the big bar can have a big influence on it, and certainly judges can have a big influence. But I think a lot of people are just afraid to do some of this stuff. And I know that some of these practice areas have gotten unbelievably complicated over the years through legislation that's been passed and practices that exist in there, and people are afraid of it. But I think if people can get exposed to it and realize that it's hey, this is something I can do, I think that there'll be a lot more people that have wonderful stories like those we heard earlier today. That's all.
Hey.
Damon's biking it all over the state, so but I think that's the deal. I think we've got to be more energetic about putting this in practice all over the state.
I actually think that the reason why the gap is closed in Albany has to do with the leadership of the chief judge of each of the Superior Court circuits. And I guess Judge Lockett is more preaching to the converted, but I really
Another legal services.
but I think that really, to be honest with you, the chief judge, in fact, actually Judge McBride, who's our chief judge, I've had ongoing conversations with him, and I think that that's key. That leadership, in terms of reaching out to the bar, is key to bridging that gap more in terms of the answer. And so, to the extent we can pass that on.
I wish we could look to legal services as a corporation to be more helpful in the years to come, but I think that their funding is going to continue to shrink, at least in the foreseeable future. There are a lot of people in the Congress that don't like what legal services stands for, don't like what they do, and look at them as troublemakers, and as a consequence, they're not going to be, I don't believe, very supportive in years coming forward. So I think this is going to be something that is going to be more on our doorstep than it is going to be on Congress's doorstep. So.
Well, thank you, Chief Justice, Judge Marshall, Judge Antonio. Really appreciate your comments today. We're going to transition to the next panel. It's just a matter of
Thank you all.